Human shock troops blasted alien scum into blood-splattered chunks of flesh across the galaxy, but no one believed that pacifist Zephyrians could fight off the ruthless Krodax invasion fleet. No one except humanity, that is. Zephyrian distress calls flooded in. A massive Krodax fleet was attacking their home system. Zephyrian defenses were outnumbered 10-1. Zephyrian leaders begged for help. There was no time to waste. Captain Zach Thompson ordered his starship Defiant to jump immediately to Zephyria, disregarding direct orders from Earth Command, to not engage the Krodax. As soon as the Defiant arrived, dozens of powerful Krodax ships opened fire. Zach quickly coordinated a cunning defense with the beleaguered Zephyrian fleet, but Krodax warships kept pouring in, more and more, an endless swarm. Unless Zach could find a way to turn the tide soon, the Zephyrians would be slaughtered and enslaved, and humanity would lose a potential ally in their war against the relentless Krodax menace. The battle for Zephyria, and possibly the future of the galaxy itself, had begun, and failure was not an option. The Defiant's guns fell silent as the last Krodax warship exploded into a brilliant fireball. Bits of twisted metal spun off into the void of space. Zach let out a cheer from the captain's chair, pumping his fist. They had won the battle. He had gambled everything to come help the Zephyrians, and it paid off. But his elation quickly faded as reality sunk in. The Krodax would be back. An empire as ruthless and bloodthirsty as theirs wouldn't let one defeat stop them. No, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a long, brutal war for Zephyria's freedom. Zach knew he couldn't abandon them now. He opened a comm channel to Admiral Zolon, the commander of the battered Zephyrian fleet. The alien's green, scaly face filled the view screen. His yellow eyes looked tired but determined. "We did it, Admiral," Zach said with a grin. "We sent those Krodax bastards running." Zolon managed a strained smile, revealing sharp teeth. "Thanks to you and your crew, Captain Thompson, Zephyria owes humanity a great debt, but the Krodax will return with an even larger fleet." "I know, and we'll be ready for them. The Defiant is staying right here to help you fortify your defenses and come up with some new strategies. We'll keep your planet safe no matter what it takes. I promise you that." Over the next weeks, Zach worked closely with Zolon and the Zephyrian military leaders. They reinforced planetary shields, repositioned defense satellites, and ran endless battle drills. He found himself growing close to the stoic admiral, sharing meals, swapping stories. A real friendship began to form between the human and the alien, forged in the crucible of looming war. However, things quickly got complicated. Zach's decision to bring the Defiant to Zephyria's aid had been unauthorized, a breach of direct orders from UEA Command. And now they knew what he had done. "Captain Thompson, you are hereby ordered to withdraw from the Zephyria system immediately," Admiral Janice Blackwell said over a vidcom, her face set in hard lines of disapproval. "Return to Earth for disciplinary action." Zach crossed his arms. "With all due respect, Admiral, I cannot comply. If we leave now, we condemn the Zephyrians to death and subjugation. I won't do that." "This isn't up for debate, Captain," Blackwell snapped. "You've already overstepped." "I'm not going to betray our values as a species and abandon an ally in need. I'll gladly face court-martial. Zephyria needs us." He cut the transmission. Let them court-martial him. He was doing the right thing, and he knew it in his bones. Humanity couldn't just give speeches about lofty ideals. They had to live by them, even when a great cost. Word of his defiance spread through Terran space like wildfire. Other starship captains, seeing his conviction, began to question the orders to not get involved. Maybe aiding Zephyria was worth putting their own careers on the line too. Meanwhile, on the Krodax throne world, Emperor Vortax seethed with rage. He smashed a clawed fist on the arm of his throne, the obsidian stone cracking under the blow. "These pathetic humans think they can defy me. I'll crush their frail bodies beneath my feet," the massive alien tyrant bellowed. "General Kravox!" A hulking Krodax in blood-red armor stepped forward and slammed a fist against his chest in salute. "My Emperor!" Take our most powerful ships and fiercest warriors, hunt down this human captain and his Zephyrian allies, burn their cities, enslave their children. I want them to suffer for their insolence." Cravox grinned savagely. "With pleasure, my lord. I will make an example of them for the entire galaxy to witness. All will know the folly of resisting the Krodax." As the ruthless general marshaled a mighty war fleet to unleash an assault on Zephyria, Zack could only ready his ship and crew for the bloody trial ahead, hoping his choice to stay and fight had been the right one. The fate of an entire alien race, and perhaps even the UEA itself, would soon rest on the outcome of the coming battle. Warning klaxons blared through the Defiance bridge as a massive Krodax assault fleet dropped out of hyperspace near Zephyria. Zack gripped the arms of his captain's chair, his knuckles turning white. He had never seen so many enemy ships before, hundreds of cruel angular warships, bristling with weapons. "Battle stations," he barked. "All hands prepare for combat." The Defiant and the Zephyrian fleet moved to intercept the attackers. But something was different this time. The Krodax ships were equipped with strange, pulsating cannons that glowed an eerie purple. Without warning, the alien weapons fired, unleashing devastating blasts of purple energy that tore through the defenders' shields like they were made of paper. Zephyrian cruisers exploded left and right, consumed by the unnatural purple fire. Zack watched in horror as a Zephyrian battleship, the Resolute, took a direct hit. The once mighty vessel cracked apart like an egg, spilling bodies and debris into the void. "Evasive maneuvers," Zack shouted as a purple beam scythed towards the Defiant. The helmsman wrenched the ship into a desperate dive, narrowly avoiding the shot. The human ship returned fire, its guns hammering at the nearest Krodax destroyer. But the enemy vessel's shields only flickered slightly under the onslaught. The technology gap was too great. "Sir, we can't take another hit from those cannons," Commander Olivia Vance said urgently from her station, "and the Zephyrian fleet is getting torn to shreds." Zack slammed a fist on his armrest. They had to do something. This couldn't be how it all ended, not after everything they had been through. Then his eyes fell on the massive Krodax flagship at the center of the enemy formation. If they could take out General Cravox, throw the Krodax into disarray. "Prep all Marines for combat," Zack ordered, his voice iron-hard with resolve. "We're going to board that flagship and kill Cravox. It's the only way." "Captain, that's suicide," Olivia protested. "We're dead anyway if we don't act," Zack shot back. "This is the only chance we have to turn the tide. Now get our boys ready for a fight." As the Marines assembled in the hangar bay, checking weapons and psyching themselves up, Zack opened a comm channel to Admiral Zorlon's ship. The Zephyrian commander's face appeared, haggard and bloodied, his bridge filled with smoke. "Admiral, I need you and your ships to cover us," Zack said quickly. "We're going to assault the flagship." Zorlon's eyes widened. "Captain, you can't be serious. Even for humans, that's—" "It's the only card we have left to play. Keep those bastards off us for as long as you can. Humanity won't forget this. I won't forget this." The Admiral hesitated for a long moment, then squared his shoulders and nodded. "Very well, I'll buy you as much time as I can. Give that sadistic vermin Cravox a taste of human fury." "With pleasure." Zack cut the comm and headed for the hangar. It was time to roll the dice. The Defiant plunged towards the Krodax flagship, weaving through a hailstorm of fire, its hull groaning under the strain. Behind it, Zorlon's battered cruisers covered its approach, drawing the enemy ships away. "Hangar in sight," the helmsman called out. "Brace for impact." The human ship smashed through the energy field, covering the flagship's hangar bay, skidding across the deck in a shower of sparks. The instant it ground to a halt, Zack was out of his chair. "Marines, you're with me. Let's go introduce Cravox to the business end of our rifles." The next minutes passed in a blur of blood and fire. Zack led his Marines through the flagship's dark, twisting corridors, cutting down every Krodax that stood in their way. The massive aliens roared battle cries and charged with electrified blades, but the human soldiers met them head-on, unloading hails of armor-piercing shots into scaly hides. Krodax bodies soon littered the decks, oozing black ichor, but not without cost. For every alien that fell, a human joined them, cut down by savage blades or pulverized by crushing Krodax fists. Zack's rifle clicked empty as he put a burst into a charging Krodax's skull. "Push forward," he yelled over the chaos, slamming in a fresh mag. "Kravox can't be far." They battled their way onto the bridge, a massive chamber with blade-like buttresses and pulsing red looms, and there at the center stood General Kravox himself, a towering monstrosity in blood-colored armor, barking orders to his crew. "Humans," the alien general bellowed as he saw the intruders, "I'll rip the flesh from your bones." He grabbed a massive warhammer from a nearby rack and charged, moving with a speed that belied his bulk. Zack raised his rifle to fire, but Kravox was on him before he could pull the trigger. The hammer smashed into Zack's side, hurling him across the bridge like a rag doll. He felt bones shatter under the impact, blinding agony far beyond anything he had experienced before. He hit the far wall and crumpled to the deck, leaving a smear of blood on the alien metal. His vision swam, darkening at the edges. Through the haze of pain, he saw Kravox laying into his marines, the hammer pulping human bodies with every swing. No, it couldn't end like this. Zack tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't obey. He looked down and saw a shard of metal as long as his hand jutting from his side, slick with his own blood. "Captain!" A strong hand grabbed him, hauled him upright. Admiral Zorlon, the Zephyrian's uniform was torn and scorched. His scaly hide burned. "The fleet?" Zack managed to rasp. "Scattered. Broken," Zorlon said grimly, pressing a blaster into Zack's hand. "But we will not let you fight alone. Now come. Let us finish this." Together, the human and the Zephyrian charged into the fray, Zack's blood leaving a trail behind them. They fought side by side, Zorlon's blaster and Zack's rifle dropping Krodax left and right. But Kravox was the real threat. No matter how many shots they put into him, the general refused to fall, his armor absorbing the blasts. With a roar of fury, he backhanded a Marine so hard that the man's helmet caved in. Zack fired until his rifle ran dry, the bullets pinging off Kravox's armor. The general turned to him, his eyes filled with sadistic glee. "Is that the best you can do, human?" Kravox mocked, raising his hammer. Zack braced himself for the blow, but it never came. Instead, Zorlon leaped into the path of the descending hammer, pushing Zack out of the way. The heavy head crunched into the Zephyrian's chest, pulverizing bone. "No!" Zack screamed as Zorlon crumpled. The Admiral had been his closest friend, his staunchest ally. To see him fall. Rage, white-hot and all-consuming, surged through Zack's battered body. He snatched a plasma grenade from his belt and primed it, feeling the trigger grow hot under his thumb. "Burn in hell, you son of a bitch!" Zack roared. He lunged at Kravox and slammed the grenade into the gap under the general's helmet, even as the alien seized him by the throat. Kravox's eyes widened in sudden realization. He tried to claw the grenade free, but it was too late. The explosion ripped the Krodax general's head from his shoulders, spraying the bridge with viscera. The massive body toppled backwards, smoke pouring from the ruined stump of its neck. Zack hit the deck, his ears ringing, his vision blurry. He crawled to Zorlon's side, ignoring the white-hot daggers of pain in his shattered ribs. The Admiral was still alive, if only barely. Bright blue blood leaked from his mangled chest. "You did it, Captain," Zorlon whispered, his voice wet and weak. "You killed Kravox." "We did it," Zack corrected him. "I couldn't have done this without you, my friend." The Zephyrian smiled, a final flash of sharp teeth. Then his eyes went dull, his last breath rattling from his lungs. Zack slammed a fist against the deck, tears tracking through the blood and grime on his face. Zorlon had given his life to save him, to give humanity a fighting chance. Zack would not let that sacrifice be in vain. By the time the battered Defiant limped back to Zephyria, Zack knew something was wrong. Fewer ships swarmed in orbit, and those that remained were damaged. Fires dotted the planet's surface. "Sir, we're being hailed by the Planetary Defense Force," Olivia said, her voice strained. They say the capital has fallen. The Krodax have seized the High Council." Zack closed his eyes. After all they had endured, all they had lost, for Zephyria to fall now was a bitter blow. The image of Zorlon's broken body flashed through his mind. No, he wouldn't accept this. The war wasn't over, not while a single free Zephyrian still drew breath, not while humanity still had the will to fight. "Signal the remaining ships," Zack said, his voice hard as tempered steel. "Tell them to regroup in the Zevo system. We need to marshal whatever strength we have left." His crew looked to him, battered and bloodied, but with a fire burning in their eyes. They would follow him to the end. Zack straightened, ignoring the searing pain from his fractured ribs. The Crodaks think they've won. They think this world is theirs, but they're wrong. We're going to show them the true strength of free people, the strength of humans and Zephyrians united. He met each of his crew members' gazes in turn. "Rest up and tend to your wounds, because when we come back, and we will come back, we're going raise hell like the Crodaks have never seen. We're going to make them regret ever setting foot on Zephyria." Zack lifted his chin, his eyes blazing with determination. "And we're going to do it for Zorlon, and for every human and Zephyrian who gave their lives for this cause. That's a promise." Resolve settled over the bridge like a cloak. Some looked eager for vengeance, others grim with purpose. But they all stood straighter, as if the captain's words were a balm for their battered spirits. They might be bloodied, but they weren't beaten. The Zephyrians had lost their capital, but Zack would be damned if he let them lose their hope as well. The fight was far from over. Ideas raced through Zack's mind as he limped towards the medical bay, already planning their next move. They would need to strike hard and fast, hit the Crodaks where they least expected it. And he had a few ideas on how to do just that. But first, they needed to free the High Council. The Zephyrian resistance needed its leaders now more than ever. If they could rescue them from under the Crodaks' scaly snouts, it would send a powerful message to every Zephyrian and to the galaxy at large. That humanity and Zephyria would never stop fighting for each other. The Defiant's hangar bay was a hive of activity. Mechanics rushed to patch up the ship's battered hull, welders throwing up showers of sparks. Medics tended to the wounded, wrapping bandages and administering painkillers. In the midst of the chaos, Zack gathered his team. He had handpicked them for this mission. Olivia Vance, his loyal first officer, Sergeant Richard Hawke, the toughest Marine he knew, Dr. Lena Sokolov, brilliant but composed under pressure, and a handful of Zephyrian resistance fighters, their scales still stained with the blood of Crodak soldiers. "Listen up," Zack said, his voice rough from smoke and shouting. "The High Council is being held in the central government compound. That place will be crawling with Crodaks, but if we can get the Council out, it'll show the Zephyrian people that this fight is far from over." Hawke hefted his pulse rifle, a predatory grin on his scarred face. "Just point me at the scaly bastards, Captain. I've got a few scores to settle." Olivia pulled up a holographic map of the capital city. Red dots marked Crodak's positions, a daunting number. "We'll need to avoid the main streets and stick to the maintenance tunnels. It'll be tight, but it's our best chance." "Tight is an understatement," Dr. Sokolov muttered, eyeing the narrow passages. "I hope you're not claustrophobic, Sergeant." Zack traced a route through the glowing lines, committing it to memory. They would have to move fast and silent. One mistake and the Crodaks would be on them like a pack of hungry razor wolves. "Kallax, this is your city," Zack said to the lead Zephyrian fighter. "You know the tunnels. You'll guide us in and out." Kallax nodded, his yellow eyes hard as diamonds. "The Crodaks have spilled the blood of my people for too long. It will be my pleasure to lead you through their black hearts." They geared up in silence, checking weapons and strapping on armor. There was no need for speeches or grand farewells. They all knew the stakes, and they all knew their duty. As the Defiant's ramp lowered, Zack took one last look around the hangar. Battered but not broken, just like him. Just like all of them. "Let's go be heroes," he said quietly, and led his team out into the war-torn city. The maintenance tunnels were dark and narrow, the air thick with the stench of sewage and Crodak's blood. They moved in single file, Kallax taking point, his eyes scanning every shadow for threats. Zach's heart pounded in his ears as they navigated the labyrinthine passages. Every distant footfall, every creak of settling debris made his finger twitch on the trigger of his rifle. One firefight down here, and the mission would be over before it began. But Kallax guided them true, leading them around Krodax patrols and through collapsed sections with a sure hand. Zach found himself gaining a newfound respect for the Zephyrian resistance. They had been fighting this war a lot longer than he had. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a deserted alleyway, just a block from the government compound. Towering walls of grey stone loomed above them, topped with razor wire and guard towers. Krodax soldiers stalked the perimeter, their black armor glinting in the wan sunlight. "Looks like they're expecting company," Hawk muttered, eyeing the defenses. "Can't imagine why." Zach ignored the sergeant's sarcasm, his mind racing. A frontal assault was suicide. They needed a diversion, something to draw the Krodax's attention long enough for them to slip inside. His eyes fell on a nearby fuel depot, its tank still mostly intact. A slow grin spread across his face. "Olivia, how good's your aim with a rocket launcher?" 15 minutes later, the fuel depot exploded in a massive fireball, sending a column of black smoke billowing into the sky. Krodax soldiers rushed towards the conflagration, shouts of alarm filling the air. In the confusion, Zach led his team to a small side gate, where a single guard stood watch. Kallax dispatched him with a quick thrust of his vibroblade, and they slipped inside the compound. The courtyard was chaos. Krodax soldiers ran to and fro, barking orders and trying to contain the spreading fires. Zach's team hugged the shadows, moving from cover to cover as they made their way towards the central building. They encountered a squad of Krodax just outside the entrance. Hawk dropped two with well-placed shots from his pulse rifle, while Zach and Olivia took out the others with short bursts of fire. The thunder of weapons echoed across the courtyard, but it was lost in the overall din of the emergency. They burst into the building, sweeping the hallways with their rifles. A pair of Krodax guards appeared at the end of a corridor, but Dr. Sokolov dropped them with two quick shots from her sidearm. "The detention level should be 2 floors down," Kallax said, consulting a stolen schematic. "We must hurry before they realize what we're here for." They found the High Council members in a large, heavily guarded cell. The Zephyrian leaders looked battered and bruised, but their eyes lit up with hope when they saw their rescuers. "I knew you would come," one of them said as Zach shot the lock off the door. "The humans have proven themselves true friends to Zephyria." "Thank us later," Zach replied, helping the council members to their feet. "Right now we need to get you out of here." They retraced their steps back through the compound, the council members moving with surprising speed and agility despite their injuries. But as they neared the side gate, a Krodax patrol rounded the corner, weapons raised. "Get the council out of here," Zach shouted to Kallax and Dr. Sokolov. "We'll hold them off." He, Olivia, and Hawk formed a line, pouring fire into the Krodax soldiers. The aliens fell, but more took their place, a seemingly endless tide of black armor and snarling faces. A plasma bolt seared past Zach's head, close enough to scorch his hair. Another slammed into Hawk's shoulder, spinning the big marine around, but he kept firing, his face contorted in a rictus of pain and rage. Just as it seemed they would be overwhelmed, an explosion ripped through the Krodax ranks. Zach risked a glance behind him and saw a mob of Zephyrian civilians storming the compound, armed with captured Krodax weapons and improvised clubs. At their head was Kallax, his vibroblade flashing in the sun. "For Zephyria!" the resistance fighter roared, and the crowd echoed his battle cry. They crashed into the Krodax like a tidal wave, beating them back with sheer fury and numbers. In the confusion, Zach and his team managed to slip away, the council members in tow. They ran through the city streets, now filled with the sounds of pitched battle, as the Zephyrian people rose up against their occupiers. News of the council's rescue spread like wildfire, transmitted by resistance fighters through back channels and secret codes. Across the planet, in every city and settlement, Zephyrians took up arms and struck back against the Krodax. Supply depots were raided, communication lines severed, patrols ambushed and overrun. For the first time since the invasion began, the Krodax were on the back foot, scrambling to contain the sudden, furious uprising. And Zack pressed the advantage. From hidden bases and makeshift camps, he and his allies launched guerrilla raids on Krodax positions. They hit hard and fast, fading back into the wilderness before the enemy could mount an effective response. Slowly but surely, they began to turn the tide, liberating town after town, base after base. But on the Krodax throne world, Emperor Vortax seethed with rage. The holographic figure of a terrified subordinate knelt before him, head bowed low. "My lord, the situation on Zephyria is deteriorating," the subordinate stammered. "The humans have been leading the resistance, disrupting our—" Vortax lashed out, his taloned hand passing through the hologram. The subordinate flinched regardless. "I am aware of the humans meddling," the Emperor growled. "They have defied me for the last time." He turned to the massive viewport that dominated the throne room, gazing out at the endless ranks of warships that stretched as far as the eye could see. The mightiest fleet the Krodax Empire had ever assembled, ready to unleash hell at his command. "Ready my ship," Vortax said, his eyes burning with malice. "We set course for Zephyria immediately. It is time I deal with these troublesome primates myself." "Yes, my lord," the subordinate said, bowing even lower. "Your will be done." As the fleet began to move, 1,000,000 battleships leaping into hyperspace one after another, Vortax allowed himself a vicious smile. The humans thought they knew war. They thought they knew defiance. But they had never faced the wrath of a Krodax emperor. By the time he was done, Zephyria would be a blasted cinder, and the humans would be nothing more than a bloody smear beneath his boot. He would make them regret ever daring to stand against him, and the galaxy would tremble at his might. The Zephyrian system was in chaos. Krodax warships poured out of hyperspace, a seemingly endless tide of black metal and malice. At the center of the armada was Emperor Vortax's flagship, a monstrous dreadnought bristling with enough firepower to reduce a planet to molten slag. On the bridge of the Defiant, Zack felt a cold knot of fear in his gut. They were outnumbered and outgunned in every possible way. The remnants of the Zephyrian fleet, battered from previous engagements, looked like toys next to the Krodax behemoths. And the ragtag collection of civilian ships that had answered his call to arms, they were brave, but they wouldn't last long against the Emperor's elite warriors. But there was no turning back now. Zephyria's fate hung in the balance. If they fell here, the Krodax would be free to rampage across the galaxy unopposed. Billions would suffer under their brutal reign. Zack couldn't let that happen. He wouldn't. "All ships, this is Captain Thompson," he said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his stomach. "I know you're scared. I am too. But remember what we're fighting for. Freedom, justice, the right of every sentient being to live without fear. The Krodax want to take that away from us. I say we don't let them. I say we show them what happens when you mess with the good guys. So let's give 'em hell." A ragged cheer went up over the comm as the Defiant and its makeshift fleet surged forward to meet the Krodax head-on. Zack felt a swell of pride in his chest. These were his people, his crew, his friends, and he would fight beside them to the bitter end. The first exchange of fire was brutal. The void lit up with 1,000 shades of destruction as plasma bolts, missiles, and energy beams crisscrossed the battlefield. Ships on both sides bloomed into brief, brilliant novas as they were torn apart by the onslaught. The screams of the dying filled the airwaves, a cacophony of agony and despair. Zack gritted his teeth and ordered the Defiant into the thick of the fighting. The ship shuddered as it took hit after hit, its shields straining to deflect the worst of the damage. Consoles exploded in showers of sparks, and the acrid stench of burning electronics filled the bridge. "Divert all power to forward weapons," Zack shouted over the chaos. "Target their command ships." The Defiant's guns roared in response, sending searing bolts of plasma into the heart of the Krodax formation. One of the enemy dreadnoughts staggered under the impact, its hull plating peeling away in molten strips. But it kept coming, pouring fire into the Defiant's rapidly failing shields. Zack's mind raced as he surveyed the tactical display. They were taking unsustainable losses. The civilian ships were being picked off one by one, and even the most powerful Zephyrian warships were struggling to hold their own against the Crodak's onslaught. They needed a game-changer, and fast. Then his eyes fell on Emperor Vortax's flagship, hanging back from the main battle like a great predator waiting to strike. If they could take that ship out, it would deal a devastating blow to the Crodak's morale and chain of command. It might just be enough to turn the tide. But getting to the flagship would be a suicide mission. They would have to fight their way through the densest part of the Crodak's formation, taking fire from all sides. Even if they managed to reach their target, there was no guarantee they would be able to penetrate its shields and armor. Zack looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew, battered and bloodied but still determined. They knew the odds as well as he did, but they also knew what was at stake. "Helm set a course for the Emperor's flagship," Zack ordered, his voice grim. "We're going to ram that bastard." There was a moment of stunned silence, then a chorus of acknowledgements as his crew hurried to carry out his command. Olivia shot him a look that was equal parts concern and respect. Zack met her gaze and nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. They both knew this was a one-way trip. The Defiant broke formation and charged toward the Crodak's flagship, engines straining as it pushed past its limits. Immediately, a swarm of enemy fighters descended on the lone ship, peppering it with laser fire. The Defiant's point defense guns chattered in response, filling the void with a hail of tracer rounds that tore the smaller craft to shreds. But more and more fighters poured in, hounding the Defiant from every angle. Missiles slammed into its hull, breaching compartments and sending crew members flying. Zack held onto his command chair as the ship bucked and heaved under the onslaught, alarms screaming in his ears. "Shields down to 20%, Olivia shouted over the din. "Hull breaches on decks 4, 7, and 12. "Reroute emergency power to forward shields," Zack barked, "and get me a firing solution on that flagship." The tactical officer nodded, his fingers flying over his console. "Locked on, sir." "Fire everything we've got." The Defiant's weapons blazed to life once more, hurling a wall of destruction at the Crodak's dreadnought. The flagship's shields flared under the impact, straining to repel the tremendous energies being poured into them. For a moment, Zack dared to hope that they might actually breach the enemy's defenses. Then the flagship returned fire, and the Defiant shuddered as if struck by the hand of an angry god. Consoles exploded in showers of flame and debris, and the lights flickered ominously. Zack felt a searing pain in his side and looked down to see a jagged piece of metal protruding from his uniform, slick with blood. "Shields are gone," Olivia reported, her voice tight with fear. "We can't take another hit like that." Zack pushed himself upright, ignoring the agony that lanced through his body. They were so close he could see the flagship's hull plates just ahead, looming like a great metal cliff. Just a few more seconds. "All hands brace for impact," he roared. The Defiant slammed into the Crodak's flagship with the force of a small supernova. The two ships, locked together in a deadly embrace, tumbled end over end through the void, trailing fire and debris. Inside, crew members were tossed about like rag dolls as bulkheads crumpled and decks collapsed. On the bridge, Zack clung to his chair as the world spun crazily around him. His vision was blurry, his thoughts muddled. Distantly, he was aware of shouting voices, of the crackle of flames and the hiss of escaping atmosphere. But none of it seemed real. Then, through the haze of pain and confusion, he saw a bright flash of light blossom at the heart of the Crodak's formation. For a moment, it outshone even the stars themselves, a second sun born in the midst of the battlefield. The Emperor's flagship, its hull ruptured and its reactor breached, vanished in a cataclysmic explosion that sent shockwaves rippling through the void. The Defiant, still locked in its fatal embrace, was consumed in the hellish inferno, reduced to atoms in an instant. In his last moments as the firestorm engulfed him, Zack felt a strange sense of peace. They had done it, against all odds. They had struck a blow against the Krodax that would be felt across the galaxy. Emperor Vortax was dead, his flagship destroyed. The Zephyrians had a chance now, a chance to push back against their oppressors and reclaim their freedom. It had cost him everything, his ship, his crew, his life. But it had been worth it. For one shining moment he had made a difference. He had mattered. As the light faded from his eyes and the void claimed him, Zack's last thought was of Earth, of the rolling hills and blue skies of his childhood home, of the people he had fought so hard to protect, even from half a galaxy away. They would remember him, he knew. They would remember all of them, the brave men and women of the Defiant who had given their lives for a cause greater than themselves. And as long as they were remembered, as long as their sacrifice inspired others to stand against tyranny and oppression, then they would never truly die. With that final, comforting thought, Captain Zachary Thompson, hero of the Zephyrian War, slipped into the waiting arms of eternity. Across the battlefield, the Krodax forces fell into disarray as news of their emperor's death spread like wildfire. Without Vortax's iron will to drive them forward, many of the alien warriors lost heart, breaking formation and fleeing back into the depths of space. The Zephyrians and their human allies pressed their advantage, chasing down the retreating Krodax and hammering them with everything they had. The once mighty armada was reduced to a shambles, its ships scattered and leaderless. It was a stunning victory, a triumph against impossible odds, but it had come at a terrible cost. The gutted wrecks of friendly ships littered the battlefield, mixed in among the shattered hulks of Krodax warships. Thousands of brave souls had perished in the fighting, their lives given in defense of freedom and justice. But even as they mourned their fallen comrades, the Zephyrians knew that their sacrifice had not been in vain. The Krodax threat had been broken, their emperor slain and their armies routed. Zephyria was free once more, thanks to the courage and selflessness of their human friends. In the years that followed, the story of the Battle of Zephyria would be told and retold 1,000 times over. The names of Zack Thompson and his crew would be etched into the annals of history, remembered forever as the heroes who had turned the tide against the greatest evil the galaxy had ever known. And though they were gone, their legacy would live on, in the hearts of the Zephyrians they had saved, in the stories passed down from generation to generation, and in the enduring spirit of all those who refused to bow before the forces of darkness, no matter the cost. For in the end, it is not the size of our ships or the strength of our weapons that defines us, but the courage that burns within our souls, the courage to stand up for what is right, to fight for those who cannot fight for themselves, and to light the way for all those who come after. And as long as that courage endures, as long as there are those willing to follow in the footsteps of heroes like Zack Thompson and the crew of the Defiant, then there will always be hope for a better tomorrow. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support me, please leave a like and subscribe to my channel. And for every comment that says, "I liked the story," I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.